ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton. Hello, Mr. President. It's great to have you.
You know, the first time I ever gave a speech as an elected official was in 1977. It was a long time ago. I'd just been elected Attorney General of my home state. I went to this Civic Club dinner 40 miles away. There were 500 people there. We started at 6. All but 3 people were introduced. They went home mad. It was unbelievable. By the time I got up to speak, I was hungry again. And I thought, well, not everybody has talked, but most people have. But everybody has already said what needs to be heard. So I will try to be brief and get Yaka back on schedule. I have a little different opinion about some of this. I think a lot of this problem we're facing today is not new. I think it's old. I think people have always hungered for power and wealth. I think people have always been willing to make excuses for themselves in the abuse of power if they could get away with it. I think the most important thing about democracy is how it works when you don't win. That is, it's a system in which the rule of law is bigger than the rule of will, in which the welfare of the community is greater than the interest of the leader, and in which the passions of the people can be moderated before they're acted on in a not well thought out way. When this great woman started, she was dealing with a Duterte who had said that he was going to kill all these drug dealers on the street. And a lot of mothers wanted him to do it because their children were getting given drugs on the street. And what they did was terrible. And finally, he's about to be held accountable. But it's important to remember there was something real that stirred the passions of the people, and that enabled him to win a real election. So the first thing I want to say is democracy is about more than real elections and majority rule. It's about people who believe in minority rights and individual rights and restraints on everybody's power. Because second thing I want to say is it doesn't matter unless you win now and again. That is, we celebrated people here who actually won elections. And it's important. You have to win now and again. Otherwise, nobody pays attention. So I think we need to look at what's going on at this moment. Some of you have said this whole information ecosystem is bizarre. There are people in my country who get all their information off social media, even information that originated in mainstream newspapers or network television shows. Oh, it seems so easy. The problem is, if you believe in democracy, it's hard work. You still have to get people to stop, take a deep breath, and think about where they are in the flow of time and what's really going on. It is not easy. And I remember in the last election, I was going out there doing what I could for my candidate. And these two guys in MAGA hats, who were clearly for Trump, came up and asked if I would take a picture with them. I said, sure. So I'm taking a picture, and this guy said, it was great the way you balanced the budget. We hadn't done it since, not close. And so he said a couple of other nice things, and I said, well, can I make my case for my candidate? And the guy looked at me and smiled, and he said, no, I'm too far gone. But he was honest. He understood that he had been captured by the identity politics which now dominate America. And so at least I had a civilized conversation with him. And I say this because this is going on in every country in the world. Look, a lot of the people that brought Duterte to power were good, decent people that got up every day and went to work and were terrified they couldn't raise their kids in an increasingly lawless and difficult atmosphere. A lot of people's identity is paralyzed by what was considered mandatory social behavior not very long ago. Our daughter got us out of our opposition to gay marriage, which was just a visceral part of my upbringing. And finally, when she was young, she looked at me and she said, Dad, it's not about you. You have to realize a relationship as intimate as marriage is not about somebody who's not in the marriage. And it's all of a sudden I was sitting there and a light came on and a burden was lifted. I'm just telling you all this because how you reach these milestones is important, and how you keep fighting is important, and winning is important. You got to win every now and then. You got to convince people that you're right, and you can't give up on people. The thing that is truly stunning, and it must be really weird if you're not American to look at it, how in the wide world, with all the good things that have happened to my country in the last few decades, we have convinced millions of people that they are primarily victims is amazing. And we have to give credit where credit is due. The people that are propagating this business have done a good job. Secondly, we have allowed too much inequality in our country. There are things to resent. There are things to be angry about. I would ask all of you also to remember that you gave the best argument that you cannot be for democracy just because it's good for you today or it produces better outcomes. In general, it does. Diverse groups basically make better decisions than homogeneous groups. I could fill this room with the studies that have proved this over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if the homogeneous group is numerous enough to win and afraid and feeling dispossessed. So I plead with you not to grow weary in doing this work. More than 100 years ago, in this great country, a great Christian Democrat, Max Weber, wrote a very short book called Politics as a Vocation. I reread it again every 2 or 3 years. It's a beautiful little book, about 117 pages long, and the most important line is, politics is the long and slow boring of hard boards. He said, if you want to do this work, you have to be willing to pay the price of time. And then if you get in power, you have to be willing, if you're religious, to believe that every single day your very soul is on the line. Because to exercise power over another person's life is to assume a role that none of us were born with the wisdom to fully exercise. That's why we have to have restraint. That's why we need the rule of law. In America, there's a convenient political saying that even a broken clock is right twice a day. That's true. And nobody's right all the time. The rest of us are fated to live our lives trying to move away from the broken clock model as close to being right all the time as possible. Those of us who believe in democracy realize that the more people who can be part of that endeavor, the more likely the society is to be better off. And now we're fighting this rise in autocracy, where everybody says, oh, I'm so tired, I don't want to think about this anymore. Oh, I know it's unfortunate what's happening in Russia, but oh, what can I do about it? And I really like this macho person who talks tough, acts tough, and relieves me of any of the burdens of thinking about all this stuff. I mean, I have a job to do every day. I got bills to pay. I've got costs to worry about. What do I care? What do I know? That is the person we have to reach in every single nation represented here. Look, I love politics. I had a good time doing it. I lost 2 elections along the way, and I just kept going. I was so dumb I didn't know it wasn't final. And I had a great time. And I was genuinely interested in people. Famous people and just people I ran into. It helps. I love the complexity of economics and scientific decisions we had to make, and I'm glad we sequenced the human genome. And doctor, I hope you can do everything you say, and please hurry up. Next year we celebrate our 50th anniversary.
No, this year.
Now,
This
This
year.
year. I forget, I'm in a new year. It's this year. And somebody asked me one day, well, I know it wasn't all easy sailing, so how did you know you were in trouble? What was your early warning system? I said, when Hillary starts going up to total strangers and says, have you met my first husband? That's when I know. So I'm saying this because I do want you to develop the opportunity for us to live longer. Because it's a great thing to have all your mental facilities when you're older. If you can hang around with your brain as well as your body, it's a great thing. But the most important thing is, however long you live, how will you keep score with your life? How you keep score determines whether you really care about democracy. How you keep score determines, if you're an Israeli, what you love most about your country. Ask yourself this when you go home tonight. If you want to stay irrelevant, whether you're in power or out, ask yourself, first of all, am I keeping score in a way that makes any sense at all? For me, it is, are people better off when you quit than when you started? Do children have a brighter future? And are things coming together instead of being torn apart? That's my simple little scorecard. And my view is that in public life, if you can say, yes, they're better off, and yes, the kids have a brighter future, and yes, we're more likely to hold together than be blown apart, I think that's a pretty good effort. If you think about the way media works, if you think about the way the authoritarian politics goes, it's all based on blowing all that up. You got to stay mad, stay resentful, and make sure your crowd wins while the other crowd loses. That's how you define victory. That's why that guy looked at me in the last election in his MAGA cap and said, I'm too far gone. In his identity, he couldn't get outside of where he was. It seemed to me that it was being suggested that the Palestinians should evacuate Gaza so that we could build the equivalents of the Strip in Vegas there. And if you've never been to Gaza, and you ever get a chance to go, and it's safe, I recommend it. It's breathtakingly beautiful. The beach is unbelievable, and it goes on forever. And one of the arguments I used to make to Chairman Arafat is that it would be a source of enormous wealth for a Palestinian state if we could secure it with enough of the West Bank to be respectable and acceptable to the Palestinians, that the beach might be the unbelievable key to the future of a Palestinian state. And that's before we knew they had any gas in the water offshore. But it all depends on how you keep score. So I will say this, I spent a lifetime trying to help make peace and progress. When the far right started trying to take over America, not through the White House, but through the Congress, many years ago, but I was already out of office. One guy said, one of their spokespeople said, you know, the problem with the first President Bush and his advisors, Colin Powell and Admiral Scowcroft, and President Clinton, is that they were trapped in the reality-based world. They simply did not understand that after the Cold War was over, we had a momentary period where America was the dominant economic, political, and military power in the world. I did understand that. They said, but we should have used it to remake reality. We didn't have to be in the reality-based world. I heard that and I thought, oh, God, this guy's been drinking his own Kool-Aid. So finally a reporter asked me what I thought. Was I trapped in the reality-based world? And I said, you know, I grew up in an alcoholic home. I spent my entire childhood trying to get into the reality-based world. I like it here, and I think I'll stay. But in order to stay, you have to make room for everybody else. In order to stay, you have to value diversity as a source of economic, political, and even personal renewal and enrichment. So, if you'll forgive me, I think the whole world's having an identity crisis. But it's not a new one, it's as old as time. It's just all in shiny new clothes of AI. But you can be screwed without an algorithm if you're vulnerable. And if you believe in individual responsibility and freedom and the power of democracy, even on the days you don't win, nobody can take it away from you. Nobody can take it away. So, don't forget, last point I want to make. Nelson Mandela told me the most important thing that happened to him in prison was realizing that the people who put him in jail could take everything from him except his mind and his heart. Those things he had to give away. Don't give them away. We're going to be fine if you keep fighting. Thank you.
So hereby, yes, let's give a hand to President Bill Clinton.